Ministers meeting of BRICS countries was hosted in 2008 on the initiation of Russia. So the major guiding principle of this grouping or this establishment of regional organization is the relations among the BRICS partners are built on the principles of United Nations Charter. So along with these principles, the norms of international law are also taken into consideration while maintaining the relationship by these countries. So alongside the principles agreed upon these states in the 2009 summit meeting, like pragmatism, openness, solidarity, neutrality, and a non-block nature with regard to these third parties also guide the relation among these nations. So around there are the grouping countries of BRICS countries focused on the major joint priorities are the grouping, which is we will call it as BRICS. The BRICS has worked out a common stance on certain regional problems like Syrian issue, Afghan issue, and Libyan issue, and the Iranian nuclear program, and also it also arrived a common agreement on economic and financial issues, including International Monetary Fund reforms and World Bank reforms. So it has led to the creation of BRICS interbank cooperation mechanism, which provides for extending credit facility in local currency and the establishment of BRICS Exchange Alliance. So these BRICS successful in expanding its external relations with the leaders of 8 leading African Integration Association and the leaders of the African Union. So the grouping has important points of contact between BRICS and new building leading centers of power that are emerging worldwide. So the member countries signed the agreements for the establishment of the new development bank and the establishment of BRICS contingent reserve arrangement for the needs at the sixth summit. So the group also had comprehensive talks regarding the BRICS strategy for economic partnership, and also had chalked out a roadmap for BRICS trade, economic and investment cooperation. So the group also had discussions pertaining to the issues of energy, banking cooperation, international trade, agriculture, health, space utilization, education, tourism, digital economy, fight against transnational crime like drug trafficking, human trafficking, or money laundering, and the removal of poverty and social inequality. So these are the major issues of major issues and focused areas in this regional organization. So the BRICS Leaders Summit is convened annually. So, if we see the structure, the BRICS does not exist in form of an organization, but it is an annual summit between the supreme leaders of 5 nations. So, BRICS cooperation in the past decade has expanded to include an annual program of over 100 sectoral meetings. So, the salient features of this grouping is together BRICS accounts for about 40% of world's population and about 30% of the GDP, gross domestic product, making a critical economic engine. So it's an emerging investment market and global power block. So BRICS looks like one of the major power block in the recent times. So the major objectives are about this grouping is the BRICS seeks to deepen and broaden, intensify cooperation within the grouping and among the individual countries for more sustainable, equitable, and mutually beneficial development. So BRICS takes into consideration each member's growth, development, and primary poverty objectives, and to ensure relations to build on the respective countries' economic strength, and to avoid competition where possible. So the major areas of cooperation of this grouping is economic cooperation. So there are rapidly growing trade and investment flows between these BRICS countries, as well as economic cooperation activities across a range of sectors. So many agreements have been concluded in the areas of economic and trade cooperation, innovation cooperation, customs cooperation, strategic cooperation between the BRICS Business Council, and contingent reserve agreement and the new development bank. So these agreements contribute to realization of the shared objectives of deepening economic cooperation and fostering integrated trade and investment markets. So in this, within the this grouping, there is a people to people exchange program also there. So which means a foster closer relationship or cooperation in the areas of culture, sports, education, film, and youth. So, people to people exchange seek to forge new friendships, deepen relations, and mutual understanding between these group. So, BRICS peoples in the spirit of openness, inclusiveness, diversity, and mutual learning. So, if we see in these recent years, we have if we take an example of India, we have been made many agreements with foreign countries in the fields of education, trade, and other economic relations. So if we see the education sector, there are people to people exchange programs are there. In these programs, in this area, our Indian students can go to the particular foreign universities to get higher education, and also the foreign students also uh, can visit Indian universities to pursue for higher degrees. So if we see, many Indian universities and IITs or other central universities also conducting many international programs, and especially like study India programs also established in many central universities in Indian universities. So this is also one of the example for people to people exchange in the area of education sector. So not only with the name of regional organizations, many individual agreements also made by the countries in the globe for further human development purpose and further economic development. So such even people to people exchange programs include young diplomats forum, parliamentarian forum, trade union forum, civil BRICS, as well as the media forum. So the BRICS also focusing on the issues of political and security cooperation too. So this grouping, in this group members, political and economic and security cooperation is aimed at achieving peace, security, development, and cooperation for a more equitable, for fair world. So as part of United Nations Charter, this BRICS organization is definitely, this grouping has to follow the UN Charter for the purpose of international peace and security. So the BRICS provides opportunities for sharing policy advice and exchanges of best practices in terms of domestic and regional challenges, as well as advancing the restructuring of the global political architecture, so that it is more balanced, resting on the pillar of multilateralism. So BRICS is utilized as a driver for South Africa's foreign policy priorities, including the pursuit of the African agenda and South-South cooperation. So if we see the impact of this grouping, BRICS on global institutional reforms, the main reason for cooperation to start among the BRICS nation was the financial crisis of 2008. So the crisis raised doubts over sustainability of the dollar dominated monetary system, and also the BRICS called for the reform of multilateral institutions in order that they reflect the structural changes in the world economy and the increasingly central role that emerging markets now play. So BRICS managed to push for institutional reform, which led to International Monetary Fund quota reform in 2010. So the financial crisis had momentarily reduced Western legitimacy and briefly let the BRICS countries become agenda setters in the multilateral institutions. So after this grouping formation, the one of the major achievement is the new development bank. So the new development bank is headquartered in Shanghai. So at the fourth BRICS summit in New Delhi 2012, the possibility of setting up a new development bank was considered to mobilize resources for infrastructure and sustainable development projects in BRICS countries and other emerging economies as well as in developing countries. So the National Development Bank's key areas of operation are clean energy, transport infrastructure, irrigation, sustainable urban development, and economic cooperation among the member countries. So, these functions on a consultative mechanism among the BRICS members with all the member countries possessing equal rights. So, there are several challenges also there with this regional grouping. The market and the market dominance of big three, Russia, China, India, is a challenge for the BRICS as it moves ahead. So, to become a true representative of large emerging markets across the world, so BRICS must become past continent, even pan-continental, and its membership must include more countries from other regions and other continents. So the BRICS will need to expand its agenda for increasing its relevance in the global order. So, as of now, climate change and development finance aimed at building infrastructure dominate agenda. So, as BRICS moves forward, fundamental principles of BRICS, that is respect for sovereign equality and pluralism in global governance, are liable to be tested as the five member countries pursue their own national agendas. So even the military standoff between India and China on the Doklam Plateau, which has effectively brought to an end the native notion that the comfortable political relationship with these countries is always possible among the BRICS members. So China's efforts is to co-opt nation states which are integral to its Belt and Road Initiative into a broader political arrangement has potential to cause conflict between BRICS members, especially China and India. If we see the importance for India with this grouping BRICS, that is, India can benefit from collective strength of BRICS by way of consultation and cooperation on economic issues of mutual interest as well as topical global issues such as international terrorism, climate change, food and energy security, reforms of uh, global governance institutions. So India remains engaged with the other BRICS countries on the nuclear supplier group membership. So, the new development bank of this grouping will help India to raise and avail resources for their infrastructure and sustainable development projects. So, the BRICS did well in its first decade to identify issues of common interest and to create platforms to address these issues. So, for BRICS to remain relevant over the next decade, each of its members must make a realistic assessment of the initiatives, opportunities, and inherent limitations. So, BRICS nations need to recalibrate their approach and recommit to their founding ethos. So, BRICS must reaffirm their commitment to a multipolar world that allows for sovereign equality and democratic decision making By doing so, can they address the asymmetry of power within the group and the global governance generally? So they must build on the sources. They must build this national development bank for the investment in additional BRICS institutions. So it will be useful for BRICS group and also other developing countries. So even BRICS should consider a BRICS lead effort to meet their commitments under the Paris Agreement on climate change and the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. This could including example setting up a BRICS Energy Alliance and an energy policy institution. So National Development Bank in partnership with other development finance institutions could be a potent vehicle to finance progress towards the sustainable development goals amongst the BRICS members. So even the idea of setting up a BRICS credit rating agency as proposed by India, opposite to Western agencies like Standard and Poor's, Moody's, etc., can be on BRICS future agenda. So this is the important areas of cooperation and primary objectives of this regional grouping, that is BRICS. So we have syllabus of in energy issues of global concern, energy and environment. So in this chapter, we are going to discuss various types of energy resources and problems of non-renewable energy sources and environmental issues like greenhouse effect, global warming and climate change, depletion of ozone layer. So the energy, the concept of energy is a fundamental thing for the present situation. So present environment concern also. So the majority of countries are depending upon their own resources. So every country has its um, natural resources, but those who are utilizing the natural resources for full-fledged, they only getting uh, economic development. So those who are not utilizing that natural resources, so they are still now they are still developing. So in this concept, the energy is a fundamental to the prosperity of the nation. So it's an essential input for economic activity. So its production, distribution, and utilization are deeply embedded in the fabric of world economies. So here we have two types of energies. One is non-renewable energy, and the second one is renewable energy. So we know that the natural energy resources are two types, as we mentioned, non-renewable and renewable. So solar energy, geothermal energy, wind energy, tidal energy, wave energy, biomass energy are the examples of renewable source of energy. So fossil fuels are one of the basic sources of non-renewable energy. So the examples are petrol, diesel, coal, kerosene, gas, etc., used for all our industrial and transport and housing activities. So the non-renewable energy resources, non-renewable energy is derived from a resource that cannot be replaced or is replaced slowly and gradually by only natural processes. So the resources that would be referred as non-renewable are fossil fuels, like we mentioned, coal, gas, oils. So even nuclear energy is also considered a non-renewable source because there is a limited supply of uranium in the earth's crust. So fossil fuels take millions of years to form as they are created by the remains of dead cells of plants and animals. So the formation of fossil fuels in the Earth's crust is a long-term process. Hence, it should not be wasted. So the fuels created from non-renewable resources are the primary sources of all the power generated in the world due to their affordability and the long process involved in their generation. So, usually, these non renewable energy sources are formed from organic materials which are heated and compressed for many years and get converted into crude oil and natural gas. So, the non renewable energy is mainly fossil fuels that are divided into uh, three categories. So there is one other non-renewable energy which is nuclear energy. So the types of fossil fuels are, one is natural gas, another one is coal, another one is oil. So the formation of natural gas is a long-term process as decomposition is conducted by a high amount of pressure and heat which takes billions of years. Here, coal is formed by the decomposition of trees, plants, and ferns, which is a time taking process. The last one, oil, is small organism of zooplankton and algae are decomposed in oil due to excessive pressure. And the another resource is nuclear fuel. So nuclear fuel can be used in a nuclear reactor to generate electricity. So uranium is one of the fuels used in nuclear reactors. So here the non-renewable energy not only consists of these resources but also refers to other minerals and metals present in the earth such as gold, silver, iron and other similar materials. So these materials takes a long time in their formation and are often costly to mine as they are found deep in the earth's crust. So, however, they are much more abundantly available than fossil fuels. So the advantages of non-renewable energy is the non-renewable sources are high in energy. So resources such as coal and oil tend to provide us more energy in comparison to renewable energy like solar and wind energy. So huge profits can be generated in the mining of coal and selling of oil or the construction of natural gas pipelines. And also these resources are easy to use whether in a home or anywhere else. So consumers can find non-renewable energy resources at a very cost-effective price. So for some people, new machines and other energy resources cannot replace their traditional minerals like coal and oil. So it is also known as traditional energy. So non-renewable energy is easily found anywhere and everywhere. So this implies that they can be conveniently moved across the world. So people living in areas that are not easily approachable can make use of non-renewable energy as well. So most importantly, the non-renewable energy resources are job creating, extracting, transporting, and refining are the parts of non-renewable sources that provide employment. So most of the non-renewable sources are also quite easy to store. So there are several disadvantages also there for this non-renewable energy. So um, many disadvantages as well. One of the major disadvantage of non-renewable energy is that it is time consuming. Mining of coal, searching for oil, installing oil drills, building oil rigs, inserting pipes to extract and transporting natural gases are very time consuming processes. It also takes a lot of effort too. So, since these non-renewable energy takes billions of years to form, they are slowly but gradually vanishing from the earth. So, using these non-renewable energy sources indiscriminately without thinking for our future generations could be selfish. So, um, non-renewable energy can be dangerous and can cause respiratory problems in human because sources like fossil fuels emit gases such as carbon monoxide. So the workers working in the coal mines or oil drills are more prone to a number of health risks. So as a result, there are large number of diseases. Even they are rapidly um, uh, feeling injuries and even deaths too. So sources like coal, oil, natural gases release a large amount of carbon dioxide when burnt. So as a result of these chemicals, they are rapidly destroying the ozone layer. So oxides like sulfur oxide and others realized while burning fossil fuels convert the rain into acidic rain, so which is harmful to wildlife as well as human beings. So many non-renewable energy sources release smog which envelops the buildings. So mostly in modern cities, people complain about the same over the time. Black smog can make your building and other property appear dark and dirty. So sometimes it may be risky to transport non-renewable sources as a huge cargo ships and oil tankers crash and spill the contents in the sea or elsewhere. So it can be deadly for the sea animals and the human beings who may come into contact with it. So to keep the power station working every time, we need to keep a huge amount of fuel in reserve. So this can be expensive and occupy a lot of space. So if we see the global impact of non-renewable energy sources, it is commonly understood that the burning of fossil fuels has a harmful effect on the environmental and is also responsible for global warming and climate changes. So along with this, nuclear materials are also associated with risk because their radioactive nature makes them toxic. So besides the environmental effect for these fossil fuels, it is also causes damage to the economy. So due to this reason, the demand and supply of these resources are always questioned. So even the cost to obtain these energies is continuously rising and suppliers and consumers are finding it difficult to deliver and utilize these resources. Even eventually the rising price ends the users affordability and consumers are forced to use other alternatives. As we see, if the rates of petrol or diesel hikes, everyone will suffer with the price hike. So uh, the uh, the conclusion of these non-renewable energy sources, there are both positive and negative aspects of non-renewable energy. So it is important to take a right action to control the use of non-renewable energy to make the world is better place for future generations. So um, so if we see the main characteristics of these renewable and non-renewable resources of energy are, if we see the characteristics of renewable energy resources, these types of resources have the ability to regenerate themselves easily. So the process of regeneration of renewable energy involves ecological processes for a specific time period. So if the renewable energy is utilized at a very high speed that is higher than the environmental's ability to refill it, then it may be become non-renewable energy in the near future. So if we see the characteristics of non-renewable energy sources, they are also termed as a stock resource, as they are not available in high quantities. So they will available in very limited quantity. So that's what environmentalists and other environment related scientists suggesting us to utilize very less quantity these non-renewable energy resources. So even these substances can be again used after recycling. So the non-renewable energy is available in the form of minerals which are generally present in the lithosphere of the earth in various forms. So the non-renewable energy resources can be present in all three states of matter, namely solids, liquids, or gases. So this is the concept of these non-renewable energy resources. So we have the concept of environment. So one of the global environmental issue. So majority of environmental problems are there. So like climate change issue, or ozone layer issue, many other issues also there. So major greenhouse effect and global warming, or biodiversity loss, uh, desertification, depletion of ozone layer, acid rain, oil spills. Many important global environmental issues are there with the use of these energy sources. So there are several problems also there with these non-renewable energy sources, like land degradation, water pollution, air pollution, global warming, ocean acidification, acid rains. So uh, if we see the concept of environment, the environment is important for the human beings. So the environment comprises all that nature bestows upon mankind. So environment constitutes the sum of all physical, chemical, biotic, and cultural factors that affect life of organisms. So it's a combination of all ecological relationship that exist in the earth. So all living beings are related to their surroundings and among themselves. So they all give something back to the nature. So um, the today man has emerged one of the most successful creatures on earth, but his greed to get maximum extraction from the nature has caused environmental concerns. So the environmental consequences of economic growth acquired political character from 1960s onward. So environmental concerns remained in focus since the Earth Summit of 1992. So the World Bank, the UNEP, and the NASA, under their joint venture, produced a scientific report entitled "Protecting Our Planet, Securing Our Future" in 1998. So the report focuses on the linkages between 8 critical environmental issues. So one is global climate change, second one is loss of biological diversity, third one is stratospheric ozone depletion, fourth one is freshwater degradation, fifth one is desertification and land degradation, and sixth one is deforestation and the unsustainable use of forests, and seventh one is marine environment and resource degradation, and last one is persistent organic pollutants. So in this chapter, we are majorly focusing about the major uh, concerns of environmental issues. One is greenhouse effect. So the greenhouse effect is one of the important. So the temperature surrounding the earth has been rising during the recent past. So this is due to the greenhouse effect. So a greenhouse is a glass chamber in which plants are grown to provide them warmth by trapping sunlight. So sunlight, a form of energy, passes through the glass and it gets absorbed inside, releasing heat radiations. Unlike sunlight, heat radiation can get not escape through glass, so the heat generated therefrom cannot escape out of the glass chamber. So the phenomenon of heat buildup inside the glass chamber from the absorption of solar radiation is called greenhouse effect. So uh, the global warming and greenhouse effect is a natural phenomenon and has been occurring for millions of years on the earth. So life on the earth has been possible because of the natural greenhouse effect, which is due to uh, uh, water vapor and small particles of water present in the atmosphere. Together, these produce more than 95% of total greenhouse warming. So, average global temperatures is maintained at about 15 degrees Celsius due to natural greenhouse effect. So, without this phenomenon, average global temperatures might have been around 17 degrees Celsius, and at such low temperature, life would not be able to exist. So, before industrialization, simple human activity did not cause any significant increase in the atmospheric temperature. So, uh, what is particularly worrisome is the increase in the emission of greenhouse gases due to urbanization and industrialization. So these greenhouse gases have increased significantly and in the atmosphere in the recent years. So some of the greenhouse gases and major sources are one is carbon dioxide. Uh, the sources and causes is burning of fossil fuels and deforestation. And chlorofluorocarbons, also called greenhouse gases. So it will uh, causes for many health issues. So the sources of these chlorofluorocarbons is refrigeration, solvents, insulation foams, aeropropellants, industrial and commercial uses, and methane also one of the greenhouse gas. So growing paddy, etc., from cattle and other livestock, termites, burning of fossil fuel, wood, and landfills. So nitrogen oxides also called greenhouse gases. So burning of fossil fuels, fertilizers, burning of wood and crop residue also causes for the source of this um, greenhouse. So if we see the effect on living beings, increased carbon dioxide concentration in the atmosphere may increase photosynthetic productivity of plants. So this is turn produces more organic matter. It may seem a positive effect. So there are strategies to cope with the greenhouse effect. So we must take immediate steps to minimize global warming by reducing emission of greenhouse gases, especially carbon dioxide. So there are several steps are there to reduce these emission or release of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. So the increased fuel efficiency of power plants and vehicles, development or implementation of solar energy, non-fossil fuel alternatives, halting deforestation, supporting and undertaking tree planting, reduce air pollution can be called strategies to cope with greenhouse effect. So the biodiversity also important, the global warming and climate change also important, so aspect in these recent years. So if we see the depletion of ozone layer also one of the major environmental concern in this recent years. So majorly, the Earth is a unique in the solar system, as it is the only planet that sustains life. So, life on Earth has passed many stages of dynamic evolution. So, human beings represent just the latest stage in this evolutionary process. So, any discussion on environment and to make it a global issue is a difficult task. So, this is due to many reasons too. So the concerns of environmental problems is conflicts and uh, the human environment interaction involves not only the question of resource use per person, but also our ability to understand the science of the environment. So our ability to regulate our impact on the environment. So there are many conferences, many summits also happened to protect the environment by the all the members in the United Nations organization. So the one important summit is Rio Summit. So it is happened in 1992. After the summit, the outcomes of Rio can be summarized into five key agreements. So one is the Framework Convention on Climate Change, the Convention on Biological Diversity, Agenda 21, the Rio Declaration on Environment and Development, and the Forest Principle. So the Agenda 21 is an action plan for sustainable development, integrating the goals of environmental protection and economic development, and based on local community and free market principles. So the Agenda 21 ensured that the concept of sustainable development become an important principle of United Nations. So a recommendation was made for the creation of a UN Commission on Sustainable Development to oversee the implementation of Agenda 21. So it is important in the recent uh, uh, area. So the Rio conference also gave birth to the Kyoto Protocol, which was the center of international debate for some time. In December 1997, more than 160 nations gathered in Kyoto, Japan, to negotiate agreements binding on the developed countries for the control of emission of greenhouse gases. So this was the consequence of the Framework Convention on the Climate Change held in 1992. So the outcome of the meeting was the document which is how come to know as the Kyoto Protocol. So this document argues the development and developed nations to reduce the greenhouse gases emissions to a particular level. So, in fact, this provision is the bone of contention of among in the developed nations. So, some of them have argued that it would halt their technological process. So, because of the opposition of the United States of America and Australia, the success of Kyoto Protocol has not been spectacular. Initially, USA had signed the protocol but withdrew in 2001. So, because of the pressure in the domestic circles, so after Rio summit, the United Nations conference on environment and development was held in Johannesburg in 2002. It is also provided the fundamental principles and the program of action for achieving sustainable development. So the environmental issues have become international and global in several sense. So the cause of the problem may be local in this environmental context. For example, carbon dioxide emissions contribute to global climate change, which clearly indicates that the effects are global and the needs for cooperation at the global level to tackle the problem. So these include atmosphere and the deep sea bed and outer space. Hence, these resources need to be preserved at global level in the interest of the whole world. So many environmental problems cross national boundaries, even though they are not purely global. For example, um, any environment related hazardous activity in one country would produce changes in neighborhood um, countries. So for instance, war in Iraq produced black rain in Kashmir. So there are many environmental issues which are local or national, but they happen in too many localities. So hence they are considered as global problems. So examples of this include unsustainable agricultural practices, soil erosion, and deforestation. Finally, and the most important among all of this is the fact that environmental issues are intimately linked to broader political and socio-economic process, which themselves are part of global political economy. So it is widely recognized that the pattern of wealth distribution, power industrialization affect the environment in a significant way. So, hence, the globalization and the interdependence among nation states give all environmental problems an international dimension. So, so this is the one of the one of the major impact of this international issue. So if we see the nuclear disasters also one of the important environmental problem in recent times. So it also introduced serious problems of its own. So nuclear plants pose potential danger of accidents that may release hazardous radioactive materials into the environment. So the nuclear disasters and fallout, safe disposal of nuclear waste generated by nuclear plants are the one of the major problems in this nuclear disaster. So if we see the major nuclear disasters in the um, recent times, the mm, one is Chalk River, Toronto, which is located in Canada in 1952, and Wind Scale Plutonium Production Center in Britain in 1957, Chernobyl nuclear reactor disaster in 1986, and Monjo in Japan in 1995. So, the impact of nuclear disasters on the environment um, is a quick, devastating, and immediate effects of nuclear radiations, as well as known as witnessed um, uh, the first nuclear disaster is Hiroshima Nagasaki nuclear attack in Japan by the United States of America during Second World War. So therefore, military use the nuclear energy is always fraught with unimaginable consequences. So the slow nuclear radiations can also emanate from a variety of sources. So uh, even underground bomb testing releases radiations in very small doses of radicals that enter water into the soil. So this radioactive water is taken by plants through roots. The radioactivity enters food chain when such plants are eaten by animals and humans. Such radioactivity has been detected even in the milk. So there are major pollutions also happened with these renewable and non-renewable energy sources too. So uh, So the concept of biodiversity is important in recent times for the protection of environment. So biodiversity refers to the variety of life on Earth and its biological diversity. So the number of species of plants, animals, and microorganisms, the different ecosystems on the planet, such as deserts, rainforests, and coral reefs, are all part of the biologically diverse on Earth. So these biodiversity or biological diversity has an infinite magnitude. So uh, the total number of species present at a global level may vary from 10 to 100 million. So the majority of these species are found in tropical forests. So if we see the concept of sustainable development also important in recent times. So the concept of sustainable development leads us to new resource consumption strategies. So they involve conservation or reduction of excessive resource use. So recycling and reuse of materials and more use of renewable energy sources like solar energy rather than non-renewable energy resources such as oil and coal. So sustainable development also requires meeting the basic needs of all deprived people in this world, was extending to this all all opportunities to satisfy their aspiration for better life. So the World Summit on Sustainable Development, also known as Earth Summit in 2002, reviewed the progress since 1992 in implementing sustainable development. So, and discussed the way forward. The issues for equity and common interests were taken up again. So, the summit also reaffirmed sustainable development as a central element of the international agenda. It gave new impetus to global action to fight against poverty and also for the protection of the environment. So, one of the important outcomes was the establishment of a World Solidarity Fund to eradicate poverty and to promote social and human development in the developing areas. So many conferences, many summits are conducting by the United Nations organization for the special purpose of the protection of the environment in all the countries. So many problems also there. Many developing countries also not supporting the United Nations, developed nations, not developing. Many developed nations are not supporting the international institutions. So all the countries are facing major environmental problems like pollution, global warming, ozone layer depletion, acid rain, natural resource depletion, and overpopulation, waste disposal, and deforestation, and loss of biodiversity. So these types of global environmental concerns are majorly many countries are facing these issues. So uh, majorly global warming and climate change and water pollution is the major three environmental problems in recent times. So recycle and then recycle properly is the solution for these global environmental problems. So implementing recycling habits into your daily life is one of the most effective ways to help lessen landfill waste, conserve natural resources, save habits, and reduce pollution, cut down on energy consumption, and slow down global warming. So, uh, the in general, the majority of the environmental crises are man-made only. So there are several technological developments also there to protect environment and reduce these environmental problems. So if we see the main threats to the environment today is deforestation and forest degradation and effects of climate change, illegal fishing, illegal wildlife trade, and oil and gas development. Other issues are the major problems for the natural environment. So the if we protect our environment, environment will protect us. So the reduced risk on human health and the environment through reducing and eliminating production, use of releases of these persistent organic pollutants and their waste will helps to human health and economy too. So this is the concept of global concerns on environment in international relations. So in tomorrow's class, we are going to discuss the concepts of human rights and ethnicity. So thank you for your participation. I am concluding the session.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for participating.
Thank you, sir.